Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Caroline Colas, and I am the Senior Director of the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan and your host today on the Positive Psychology Hour. We are going to be talking today with Nancy Kirsner about boundary power, how to recognize and set healthy boundaries. Life is all about boundaries, how we define ourselves, our relationships with ourselves, with others, with communities, and with the world around us. Establishing healthy boundaries is a lifelong developmental process that begins by knowing and owning our own inner life and reality, and then communicating that to those around you. We will explore action methods to establish boundaries in a flexible, grounded, and useful way. Boundaries are how we define ourselves, where we stop, and the world and others begin. A separate sense of self, knowing what is and isn't good for us, is necessary for our very survival. So why do so many of us struggle with setting and maintaining boundaries? Why is it often hard to set and respect our own and others' boundaries? And how can we be proactive with our boundaries, no matter who is on the other side or how others behave? Boy, is that important. In this workshop, we're going to blend a powerful action method that will help us establish boundaries in a flexible yet grounded way that are specific. And our presenter is Nancy Kirsner. And Nancy is not only familiar to the JCC community, but to the Positive Psychology Hour. This is a series that we do in partnership with the Whole Being Institute, our partner. And Nancy, I welcome you to the call. How are you doing today? I know you're eager to get started.
I'm doing well, thank you. And it's been really fun to get ready for this. And the timing, I think, is perfect. I'm glad to see a lot of people that I know from October and other events and faces that I know. So that's great. The reason I think this is perfect is most of us, I know I am, are getting ready to travel somewhere, be with married kids, grandchildren, other people. I think this is a perfect time when you're traveling and meeting with other people and to talk about boundaries.
Before we get started, Nance, I want everyone to know a little bit about you. Your bio wasn't up on the website, but we can do this off the cuff a little bit, just because you're an extraordinary human. And and in addition to that, you've done a lot of things. Most recently, you completed a book.
I have, and I'll just say a little bit because hopefully when it comes out in the fall, I completed a book with a colleague that actually emerged out of me getting certified in positive psychology. So I'll just tell you the bottom line so I can kind of tease you into it. We had to do a final project in positive psychology. We could do whatever we wanted. So I wanted to go back and sing and dance like I'd done when I was a very young girl, elementary school. So I started taking singing lessons. And this is what happened. So my singing teacher and I, about, 6 years later, we have written a book, become dear friends, and it's called, This Is Not What It's Going to Look Like, but this is what we would like it to look like, because we like color. Routledge Press will not be doing a pink book. Anyhow, it's all about positive psychology as applied to music professionals. Really could be dancers or anyone performing. So I'll tell you more about it in the fall, but it did emerge out of Whole Being and going to take singing lessons, if you can imagine. So
I love how you followed your curiosity and it led you to a whole other aspect of your career and integration. And just so people know a little bit about your background and why you're so interested in boundaries, can you tell them a little bit?
I'm interested in boundaries because I was raised in the Northeast in Pittsburgh and in a Jewish family. And I didn't know I had bad boundaries, but I did. I didn't know until my kids married people that were from the Midwest. And I was shocked to see they didn't do the same thing that we did in my family. So it's really been both a personal thing. And I would have to say, you all know I like to be very practical. So in 40 plus years of practice, if I had to say the one thing people ultimately end up when they get to the work part, not just very important, the sharing the feelings, the identifying the feelings and thoughts, but so much of our work is about cleaning up our relationships with people, with work, with requests. So, I mean, I could really say it's all about setting boundaries. And my favorite example is that stoplight, red, green, yellow, red, that is such a great symbol when our boundaries can be that clear. This is a yes, this is a no, and this is a maybe. I need to think about it. It just cleans up our life so much.
I'm thinking
in our
about Chris Peterson.
relationships.
I'm thinking about Chris Peterson, right? And the VS Strengths and how he said relationships
Absolutely.
matter. So
Right.
take it away. I'm going to let you
Okay.
go ahead and get
So
started.
speaking of, since Carolyn put on the table VIA strengths, these are character strengths. Even if you haven't taken the VIA, which is free, well, we can send you the link. So the character strengths, I think that boundaries really muscles up and helps us work on is perseverance, self-regulation. They don't mention the character strength of grit, but I think that's what we call it a little more. Grit. And also, it also works on the heart and vulnerability. So boundaries are a very conscious, ongoing, mindful practice. This is not an easy area. It's messy. It's not one-time learning. You have to do them again and again. And it's kind of a developmental process because as your marriage changes or your relationships or your kids get older, you have to always be kind of looking at the boundaries because they shift. Most of the time, we get in touch with a boundary that's been crossed or violated. And then we go, ugh, that didn't feel so good. And we kind of work backwards from that. But setting good boundaries always begins with, okay, something might have happened, but then I got to go inside and I got to really think and feel and find out what my values are and where I want to set the boundaries, because it's very subjective for each of us. You got to know your own values and you have to know what reality do I want to communicate to this person about this subject. So what I'd like to do today, because I don't want to be doing the talking. I'm going to do a quick review of what we went over in the first one, and then I'm going to put us in breakout groups and I've suggested, I'll show you a slide that has some very typical boundary situations, and you're welcome to take one of those, or you might be thinking there might be something specific going on with a boundary that you want to discuss when you get in your small group. But I really want you to think about it, what it is, and crisp it up. And be able to describe the situation pretty crisp. And then we will go into, so you can, in your groups, talk about specific ways you want to set boundaries. And I really want you to get to the talking, doing part, not just describe the problem, because this is about action.
We did have a question. We did have a question about how are boundaries different in the Midwest?
Well, this is my experience. In my experience, in general, social and parental behavior was much more structured. People didn't offer advice unsolicited. They didn't comment. There was just much more containment and not stepping over the boundaries if they weren't specifically asked to weigh in. That would kind of be one of the biggest ways that I saw. Didn't seem to be as much interrupting as kind of I was used to in kind of my family system or world. There just seemed to be more spaciousness allowed in the communication. I don't know if that answers you, but
sounds great. Thank you.
The other thing, our beloved Phoebe, one of the tremendous gifts of Phoebe is Phoebe's able to take huge pieces of what you've learned and tie them together. So Phoebe says, be sure and talk about everything we're going to do today really ties in with all of positive psychology, because positive psychology is all about how can I make better choices, and that's what boundary setting is about, practice. So we're getting in setting boundaries, we are living that self-determination theory. We are making choices. We don't have control over what other people do and things that happen, but we always have control over the choices we make. That's that internal locus of control. And it's that wonderful question that I always, how do I want to be in this situation? How do I show up? How do I want to show up? And this is really what boundaries are all about. How I want to be in this particular situation with this person in this role. So I just wanted to tie that in. I think Sherry was speaking to you last week also.
Correct.
About, yep. And this is the part of when you work on yourself, because you all do a lot of work on yourself. It's not just therapy. This is the cognitive behavioral part of therapy, where it's not just about knowing what you feel, it's being able to think it through and how am I going to articulate that. So this is that, self-talk thinking part of therapy. Because if you just share your feelings with someone, you're not going to be setting actual boundaries. And that's where we sometimes get lost. Okay, let me get my share screen up. Okay, everybody knows I always like to say from Robert Frost, good fences make good neighbors.
Nance, do you want to put it in slideshow view?
Yeah, let me do that. I always get reminded to do that if I can find this thing. Okay, I get that out of the
It's up at the top, or some people go to the bottom.
Where'd you go to, slideshow? Okay.
At the very, very top. You see
where's
that?
the from? Yeah, I do, but there you go, from beginning. Okay. There we go. So this is a boundary. This is a beautiful fence, out in nature. It's great, but it's not very tight. It wouldn't hold a lot of things back, but it's a pretty boundary. So I just wanted you to remember there's all kinds of boundaries. So we're going to do a quick review of what's a boundary, why we need them. We're going to name some different kinds of boundaries and look at some different qualities of them. But mainly today, I want to get us into practice, practice, practice. So if you didn't see part one, or you want to ask me any questions about the slides, I'll put my email or whatever, and we can kind of go into that, because I really want to allow a lot of time for us to practice today. So a boundary can be thought of. It's a barrier between me and you, and from you and me. So boundaries are how I protect myself, and they're also how I teach people how I want to be treated. And all healthy relationships need boundaries. It's what makes relationships feel safe and stable and confident. And you can actually, when you have stated clear boundaries, it really is the basis of good, deep intimacy. Because you have a roadmap of where you can go and where you can't. There's all kinds of different boundaries. A lot of what I deal with in therapy, of course, they're relational, emotional, and social boundaries, because people are usually talking about someone, their boss, their partner, that they need to clean something up with. And they really bring sanity to our life, because if we don't have boundaries and we keep allowing something to happen, our lives are kind of chaotic. It also sets us up for a lot of stress. And another one that's real important, and I know all of us, there's a lot of very high-powered people and women on this call, another boundary sometimes we forget about is time boundaries. It's my job to make my life sane, and how much am I going to fit in? I know this is one of my things I still work on. How much am I going to fit in my life? Those are time boundaries. How fast do I want to spin in a day? So depending on what you look at, I just wanted you to get a sense of there's many, many different kind of boundaries. So I was just talking to you about time boundaries. Time boundaries also can be, maybe I get lost in a project when I have 5 things to do. So time boundaries are really important. Physical boundaries have to do with how close I'll let you, or it might have to do with an intimate relationship, or some people don't like to even be touched on the arm. Conversational boundaries. Internal boundaries have more to do with how I regulate myself. There's material boundaries. Material boundaries come up a lot. I was thinking of families I work with that they have kids at home and adolescents, and the issue of, you've been taking those clothes out of my closet. Don't touch my blouses. Don't touch my shoes. So those are kind of physical boundaries that come up. And so many different kinds of boundaries. And I'm sure you could, don't worry too much about what category they fit in, because a lot of these categories kind of hold hands and get combined. This, I just wanted you to have a visual of healthy boundaries. You can notice that those little dots are consistent. So in healthy boundaries, it's very clear where you can get in and where you can get out. You see the little spaces. Unhealthy boundaries usually are inconsistent. Maybe there's no boundaries at all. Sometimes people look at me and say, what's a boundary? And I know, what is it? Sometimes people don't realize what they are. So just to put some language, inconsistent boundaries are very loose and porous. And sometimes people don't realize this is a boundary too. When somebody is rigid, like a vault, nothing gets in and nothing comes out. Sometimes people have family members or people that they love, and we kind of joke and say, oh, that person is like a black box. I have no idea what goes on with them. I don't know. That's somebody that has kind of rigid boundaries. There are many reasons, and this is where it's interesting. I think we spend a lot of time in therapy about maybe talking about why it's so hard for us. And I'm going to encourage you to spend this summer not talking about it, but really, make your summer a life lab for boundaries and practice it. Practice, experience it. If you need to change it, and you will. Boundaries are messy. You got to work with them. It's kind of like working with clay. You get it, and then you might have to reform it. So there's a lot of reasons. Most of them have to do with, we like to people please. And I don't like to make all of that sound pathological, like codependence. It's not always codependence. It's how we've been raised. It's part of our culture. It's a big part about being a good woman and a loving woman. Boundaries can very much be tied to our self-worth. We really like getting that feedback. It makes us happy. So I don't want to make it all bad. Sometimes we don't have boundaries because we haven't figured it out. We just kind of let things happen. What I also hear a lot is that setting boundaries takes a lot of vulnerability, and you're going to get pushback. And a lot of times people say, well, what are they going to think about me if I set that boundary? They're going to be mad at me. They're not going to like me. And that's a big one about, we don't want to deal with the pushback that we're going to get. But I really want to encourage you to push through it. So here's just a little, let me go back to that. So here's just a little cost benefit analysis to encourage you. Yes, let's work on those boundaries. So it does improve your self-esteem and your self-respect when you can say, this is what I want, this is what I don't want. Obviously, it very much clears up your communication, and people don't have to wonder what you want. It also increases the respect you get from others. Sometimes they might not like it, but they will respect you for being clear. And if you can't, being able to set boundaries is what reduces your stress and your burnout, because you can set boundaries. You can say, oh, I'm giving too much here, let me pull back. Some of the, I don't want to call them cons or negatives. I think these are the challenges that you have to push through to do it. And I think they're a necessary part of the journey. Yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable. Even for me, even now, don't think I got this all down pat. When I have to set boundaries that are new in sometimes relationships I've been in a long time, it's very hard. So it's never easy for me. So I'm right there with you. You will get sometimes resistance from others. It could create a conflict. It could. If somebody's used to you not saying much and you're always the one in the car that says, oh, I don't care where we go to eat. And all of a sudden you start speaking up. Sometimes it can be a conflict. Oh, you have an opinion now. Yes, I do. And sometimes for people, it's, you're afraid you're going to lose the love of the people. Here's just a quick review of healthy versus bad boundaries. You're respecting your own privacy. You're treating yourself as an equal. you're expressing your appreciation as well, and you're respecting your values and your beliefs. That's the self-determination. I'm acting congruent along my values and my beliefs. This kind of responds a little bit to the question of what I saw that was different in, I shouldn't say all Northeastern, in my way I was raised. So these are some of this, what I call, I wouldn't have said bad boundaries. I'd say boundaries that have been violated. When you give an unsolicited opinion or criticism and no one's asked you, we don't do that as adults. When somebody wants to interfere in your personal life and you haven't invited them. Some people have this habit of starting these, sometimes they're so little, but they just start these picayune little arguments about very little things. And you kind of wonder, well, where is that coming from? That's also a stepping over a boundary. Being overbearing, that's mentioning something, after you say, well, hey, Carolyn, I think it'd be a good idea. And she says to me, no, I don't want to do it. But I keep pressing the point. And the other one, this is an interesting one. It's a bad boundary if I create unhealthy expectations. And sometimes I create unhealthy expectations by over-promising or that I'm going to do something. Or sometimes too, I set an unhealthy expectation if I don't speak up at all, because I haven't told people where I'm at. So it can happen in a lot of different ways.
We also had a comment that boundaries are different in different cultures.
Absolutely. They're different in cultures. They're different times and different contexts. I was traveling with grandchildren, dog and nanny last weekend, and don't set boundaries when everybody's cranky and tired. So context is really important. Everybody knows this is one of my favorites because I think I need to hear this all the time. Not our job to fix others. It's not our job to take responsibility for others. It's not our job to make other people happy. And it's not our job to anticipate the needs of others. I feel lighter already. It's okay if other people get angry at me when I set boundaries. And people don't have to agree with my boundaries. I have a right to set my boundaries and my own feelings, and I am enough. Okay. I'm going to send you off in just a minute. So this is just kind of what we're doing today. We're understanding why it's important to set boundaries. We're going to identify some of your own values in a specific situation, and we're going to do some practice. And then at the end, after we do our small groups, you're going to be in small groups for, let's see if we have enough time. Yeah, we do. For 15 minutes, and you're going to be in groups of 4. So if somebody can do timekeeper and you can each speak about 2 minutes. And after we do the small groups, we'll come back together as a big group and do some sharing and processing.
Nancy, we had a couple questions. Amy
Okay.
says some people often give unsolicited criticism to their children. And Stephanie says it can be confusing when a friend talks excessively about her personal life. Should you never speak up with advice or ask a question?
Good questions. And we are going to do Q&A at the end here, but I want to say thank you for giving the lecture. The thing we're doing today, the context mostly I'm speaking to is adults. And here's the distinction I make. And this is something that, it's very hard when you're a parent. Like, at what age are they no longer your kids and they're adults? This frequently will come up when, kids are in high school or maybe off at college. I'm mostly talking about in the adult world, we don't give unsolicited opinions. So I'm mostly talking in the adult world, unless somebody says, hey, Nicole, I really want you to weigh in. I'm going to share something and I want to know. So I'm talking more in the adult world. And then there is that, I think there really is a lot of times in adolescence, because this comes up in therapy a lot, where, you really got to say to that adolescent, are you open to hearing me? Do you want some input? Because there's many times they're just going to stonewall you, and then it's not an effective communication. And even in adult communication, sometimes you're chomping at the bit, you want to say something. It's always good to check in with the other person. is it okay if I weigh in, or do you want me just to listen? So those are ways that I take care of those boundaries by asking the other person.
Here's a great one. How do you hold back as an adult when you think there is a healthier path? And is that to that first question that you had, or that first comment, which is, it's not my job to fix anybody?
How do I hold back?
How do you hold back as an adult when you think this is a healthier path? And you know, when you can see somebody, especially you want to help them, and they may not
I'll
realize
give
it.
a brief. You hold back by developing your muscles of self-regulation, containment, breathing. You know, this is a big, to sit there and breathe. And people that work with me, particularly as couples, know I give out these little small, they make duct tape and beautiful patterns now. And sometimes just as a fun and a visual reminder, I tell people, if you have to carry around this duct tape in your pocket to get you to remember to be quiet. So it is a discipline, and it is a practice. And, my rule of thumb is I try not to do anything for another person that they can do for themselves. Now, sometimes time gets in the way. And, you got to remember, even though you might be dying to tell someone or share your knowledge, I always, again, want to think about, am I robbing that person of discovering themselves how to do this? Because a lot of times we're not bidding to the wisdom of that person. And sometimes we want to make it happen sooner. So I don't want to rob anybody of life experience, because that's how we really learn. So before I sent you off in groups, I just wanted you to be able to read a couple of these things so you could get a sense of this, of what it sounds like, some of these sentences. If you text me, I'll text you back at a time that works best for me. This is always great. These people that text you in the middle of the night, or they text you at the end of the business day, and then you get a mess. You haven't responded to me. It's 8:00 at night. So if you continue to pressure or guilt me or talk to me that way, I'm going to have to end this conversation. I would appreciate you're not bringing this up anymore. I understand you're angry, but I don't want you to speak to me that way. And if you continue, I'm going to have to end this conversation. So you might notice that all of these statements, have an action tied to them. They have an action or consequence. Okay. No right way or wrong way to do this. I said I would suggest, here's some situations that I thought would be good to build some skills and practice with. And they're pretty universal, or you can use your own. I think they're pretty typical, and then we'll send you off. So I want you to have enough time. I'm looking at the time here. I think they're self-explanatory, but I'll let you read them and see if you want to ask about any particular one. You can pick one of these, or if you have one yourself. So before we send you away, does anybody want to ask me about any of these 6 named examples?
How do you define codependent in context of setting boundaries? Concepts seem related. I'm curious about how they are different.
Okay, that seems to be a question that doesn't relate specifically to this task right now.
Yeah, that was before you put that up.
Okay, so yeah, that's a whole lecture about how do you define.
Well, maybe you want to handle that when we come back?
Yeah. When I use codependence is a very overused word. I don't particularly even like it. When I use codependence in a mental health or clinical way, it's someone that is not standing in the center of their life. They're out of balance. Let me just say it that way. They do too much for others and they leave themselves to last. That's just a real simple.
Okie doke. Okay, I don't think we have any other questions. So here's the thing, everyone. Some of you have said that you want to join breakout rooms. Some of you have said you can't because you're not in a place where you can talk. Just stay in the main room. And
Stay in the main room, yeah.
if you're, give me a moment. If some people don't join and I have two in one room, I may move you around. So if you're there by yourself, I apologize, not to worry. It just means a few others didn't sign in, and I will move you. So give me that time. So, and Nancy, how long is it that you want them to be?
Let's see, it's now is
22.
okay. So we're going to give them, it's going to be fast.
That's okay.
Let's give them 12 minutes.
Okay. I'm going to send you guys off.
So focus.
And I'm going to pause the recording.
So let me have, let's do a few minutes sharing in your, maybe we should just have people type into the chat. What's something that you learned in your chat about yourself and boundaries, or anything else you want to share? Something that you noticed about yourself and setting boundaries, or maybe something you noticed when you listen to somebody else. Anything you want to share?
Something. Yeah, I'm going to say something that I learned. I really appreciated my group. And I just want to say that a couple of times the need for self-regulation and people exemplifying it while they were, you know, in a situation that was uncomfortable for them, where they effectively set boundaries and it didn't descend into something unpleasant. It was really handled with grace and a deep understanding of themselves, and creating an equality there that didn't tip over into crossing boundaries again. And I was really impressed with the group.
Thank you. Thank you. And it sounds like you had a good group.
Yeah.
And that there, to be able to say that there was grace and balance and it didn't go anywhere where it, so that's great. And the other thing too that I want to remind you is, you know, you all have friends and girlfriends and whatever, is call somebody up and practice. It, you know, it really helps to, you know, run it by and see someone else do it, which is also what you were commenting on. It's, you know, we learn a lot by role modeling.
We had some comments in the chat.
Okay.
Let's see. It's easier to give advice than set boundaries myself. To separate, I learned to separate my feelings about the crossing from the facts of the situation. I admire the self-respect that people have and don't care how they are perceived when they set boundaries. Even though cleanups are incredibly difficult to gain the courage and words to address well, it is more difficult not to address the issue and resent the person forever. I learned that it's okay to set boundaries. Just choose words without judgment or criticism. And how about this one? There are times that I have been slow to set them, and that's confusing to others and not nearly as effective as setting clear boundaries in the beginning. Beautiful, everyone.
Wonderful comments. Wonderful comments. I know we have 5 minutes left. So just to bring a little closure to this, what did you learn and how are you going to apply it in your life? Let's get real specific. And you don't have to tell us, you could say, I'm going to apply it with my son, You can just bare bones it.
The slides were great. Thank you. In my group, a woman gave unsolicited advice, and I had to tell her that I had not asked for it. So she learned to speak up.
Wow, great. So what did I learn? Where and how am I going to apply it? Because remember, the big thing is you got to just start putting it into action and see how it works. It's not an intellectual process.
It takes courage, but it's worth it. Maybe have a scripted response ready for an uncomfortable situation, practice it beforehand.
Absolutely. I often write things out. I write them, I practice them. that's a great way to do that.
Yeah, Nicole comments, it might not happen in the moment because I'm triggered and I can't think. So some self-compassion.
And right on. And I want to go back to, I will tell you, the common way is somebody violates your boundaries, or you find yourself annoyed, angry, or disappointed, and you have to kind of work backwards and go, oh, sometimes you don't even.
Nance, I accidentally muted you, I
It's
think.
okay. I was just saying, so oftentimes something happens and you don't even know your boundary was violated, and you kind of have to work backwards after the violation happened and you're annoyed.
Ugh, I did it again. Can you guys unmute yourselves? So we got a bunch of people that are muted and unmuted, and that just interferes with the recording. And Nancy, can you unmute? Sorry.
I'm unmuted. I'm
Okay.
unmuted. Okay. So also, I would be remiss if I didn't add, what did you learn? Where and how are you going to apply it? And then I also like you to think about what might be one obstacle you know you're going to run into. It's good to think ahead of time. Like sometimes, oh, I'm going to present this to such and such a friend, and I know, okay, she's going to be defensive. I'm going to have to get through that. So it's good to think, or maybe you'll have your own obstacle inside, like, oh, I'm really scared. I'm not sure that this isn't going to impact how he feels towards me. So look at your own obstacles before you do this. This is a conscious, mindful thing. Oh, here's a good one.
Okay.
Yeah, you can't be self-regulated at the same time you're triggered, which is also the time if you're on a phone or you're in a meeting. There's nothing wrong with saying, if it's people well, I'm just feeling a little triggered right now. If it's people and trust, I'm going to just go take a walk, and I'll come back to this. Nothing's an emergency room. You can just listen and say, I'm going to get back to you. I need to just think this through.
Inability of another person to hear me. Obstacle, our family beliefs that we all must drop everything to help others. Yeah, I know that one too, Janet. I have to stop caring what people think of me. Yes, triggered in the moment, and then feel shame. Shame. Should have already mastered everything. Why can't they do their stupid, simplistic, unsolicited advice? Now I'm trying to ask ahead of time. I want to save and do not want any unsolicited advice. It sounds to me like, Nancy, one of the ways to interrupt that cycle when we get triggered too is just some self-compassion, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And to really make contact with the body so that we're present, we're physically, like whether it's touching our hands or putting our hands on our heart, we just take a moment to pause and breathe and get out of that fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, so that
Absolutely. Yeah.
we can be more responsive. Yeah.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with naming it. You can also say to people, right now I'm just a little cloudy, I'm in my feelings and I don't want to respond from that. This deserves some time and space. So I'll get back to you. And to the person that said, I think it was Helen, I really would like you to adopt an open-minded beginner's mind. Nobody is an expert at boundary setting. I am not, nobody is. And remember what I said, it's messy. It is messy. So please, if you just remember that it's a life lab experiment. If you find one of those situations and you go, whoa, I didn't handle that very well, mindfulness and self-compassion, look at it neutrally. Don't judge it. Just say, need to redo that. There's your life lab experience. Think about it, and it would be better to use your brain to say, well, let me think of how I would have wished I said it, or let me practice what I'll say next time. That's much more useful than judging yourself and blaming yourself, because if you judge, shame, and blame, you're going to shut down and just beat yourself up. So you haven't used that life opportunity in a way that's going to help you grow. And I want you to use it to help you grow. Does that make some sense?
Beautiful. Beautiful, Nancy, and everyone. Wow, these are amazing and powerful shares. Patrice says, I need to stop pressing my daughters when they set their boundaries because I feel there's an obligation. They deserve respect.
Yeah, beautiful. Boy, you are really taking this in. I can hear it in the responses. Wow. Wow.
I also realized after the breakout sessions that I could have told the group about something that set me up for having trouble setting boundaries dating back to childhood. Yeah, well, Amy, you can always do that with a friend. I just want to thank, we're at the top of the hour, and I want to thank Nancy for once again uncovering the mystery and some of the magic and some of also the work that comes from being human. And Tal Ben-Shahar talks about this permission to be human all the time in terms of what we feel, and that it's messy, right? That it's not easy to communicate, but spending time on our relationships is one of the greatest resources that we have, and there are lots of gems to uncover there. And thank you so much, Nancy, for helping us have some tools to approach this with, and then having a little practice session with each other to do so. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you all did. And have a fantastic summer, everyone. Stay in touch with us. Feel free to come off mute, stay in touch with us. We'll be doing some incredible things. One of them I highly recommend is called clutter clearing. So if you have some time, and Marilyn comes to us from Santa Fe, it's virtual, and she's fantastic. She's doing a general clutter clearing, which starts tonight. And then in July, she's doing a paper clutter clearing. And if you're in town, we're doing some forest bathing, some walks with Lori. It's fantastic, and lots of other things. So I hope you'll stay in touch, and that we see you either on Zoom, in our Zoom Unity, or in person. Love you so much. Take care.
Love you all. Have a great summer.
Thank
How do we
you.
get
Thank
to
you
the
so
clutter
much.
clearing?
Thank you.
Caroline,
Wonderful
The clutter
program.
clearing,
Thank you.
I can put it in the chat for you. All right, I'll
What?
turn off the
Okay.
recording, and I'll put